In the heart of Kenya, a silent disaster is unfolding. A once thriving land reduced to ashes. For decades, the charcoal trade has promised prosperity. The price, our forests, our wildlife, our future. Driven by poverty in rural areas and urban demand for cheap fuel, Kenya is paying the ultimate price. But hope remains. Kenya's future lies in our hands. Can we stop this cycle of destruction? Kenya, a country rich in natural beauty, has long relied on its forest for sustenance and shelter. But today, a silent crisis threatens the nation's environment, livelihoods, and future. The charcoal trade, once seen as a lifeline for rural economies, has transformed into a menace. Behind every bag of charcoal is a story of environmental destruction, poverty, and unsustainable practices. This is the story of how the charcoal business, once considered a blessing, has become a curse for Kenya.
Well, people always talk about how the charcoal trade is destroying the environment. And yes, it's true. We see it every day. Trees are disappearing. The land isn't what it used to be. But for us, in these rural areas, what choice do we really have? We don't have many options. Charcoal is what feeds our family, put clothes on our children's back, and keep our homes warm. Without it, many of us will have nothing. Most of us here don't have access to big farms or jobs in the city. The land we live on doesn't support large-scale farming. It's either too dry, too rocky, or the rains are unpredictable. We tried growing crops, but the soil is so poor, and the yields don't cover our cost. Charcoal, on the other hand, is quick money. I can cut down a few trees, burn them into charcoal, and sell a bag for around 1,000 shillings. It may not seem like much, but it's enough to buy food for my family for a few days.
I hear what the charcoal traders are saying. And I don't doubt that for many, this trade is a lifeline. It's a harsh reality in Kenya. Rural areas where jobs are scarce, land is unproductive, and poverty runs deep. I understand that when survival is on the line, people will turn to whatever means they can to provide for their families. But here is the hard truth. Continuing down this path is a short-term solution that's creating long-term damage we can't afford to ignore. Every tree, cut down for charcoal pushes us closer to an environmental collapse. In many parts of Kenya, entire forests have been wiped out to feed this trade. We are losing over 50,000 hectares of forest cover every year, much of it to illegal logging for charcoal production. These aren't just statistics, they represent ecosystems being destroyed, biodiversity disappearing, and soil fertility being lost. We are not just talking about trees. When you cut down a tree, you are destroying a whole system that supports life. Forests are home to wildlife. They regulate water cycles. They absorb carbon dioxide. Without them, the land dries up. Rivers stop flowing and the soil erodes, leaving behind barren and productive land. The very land that charcoal traders and their families depend on is being destroyed by the trade itself.
The charcoal trade in Kenya has deep roots, stretching back decades. Charcoal has traditionally been a key source of energy for rural and urban households alike. For many, it is the most affordable and accessible way to cook food and heat homes. Rural communities, where economic opportunities are limited, have long depended on charcoal production to make a living. It was for a time a means of survival. In the early days, charcoal production was modest, with trees felled selectively and the environment considered. The forest seemed limitless and the demand manageable. Charcoal became a lucrative business, providing much needed income to families. But as demand grew, the charcoal industry became unsustainable, evolving from a rural solution to an environmental and economic disaster. Today, the charcoal industry is one of the leading causes of deforestation in Kenya. Entire forests have been wiped out, leaving behind vast swaths of barren land. According to the Kenya Forest Service, the country loses over 50,000 hectares of forest cover each year due to illegal logging. Much of it is fueled by charcoal production. The process of producing charcoal is devastatingly simple. Trees are felled, burned in pits, and reduced to blackened chunks of fuel. But this simplicity hides a complex problem. Charcoal production is inherently wasteful. Only about 20% of the tree's biomass is converted into usable charcoal. The rest is lost in the form of smoke, ash, and emissions, contributing to air pollution and accelerating climate change. Forests are more than just trees. They are ecosystems that support biodiversity, regulate water cycles, and absorbs carbon dioxide. As the forests disappear, so too does the wildlife that once thrived there. Indigenous species are forced to flee or die, and the delicate balance of nature is disrupted.
We understand the damage we are causing, yes, but no one needs to tell us that dead trees are disappearing. We see it. We live it. Every year we have to go further and further looking for trees worth cutting. If it is in your farm you have to look for, you continue looking on the edges, on corners. The rivers that used to run through our village are now, most of them are dry. But the truth is we don't have a real alternative. If I stop making charcoal, what do I do? There are no other jobs in the region. People talk about sustainable alternative. Like these ones I've had, the briquettes or solar energy. But those aren't practical for us. For example, briquettes. We don't have the technology, training, or capital to start a briquette making business. And solar power. It's too expensive for people like us. If we would afford the panels, it doesn't solve the immediate problem of needing money to survive today. Charcoal is right here, right now. The demand for charcoal in the cities is huge. Yes, like I understand in Nairobi, people depend on charcoal for cooking, especially those who can't afford gas or electricity. As long as there is demand, people like me will keep supplying it.
What I want charcoal traders to understand is that this isn't just an environmental problem. It is an economic one too. As forests disappear, the land becomes less and less capable of supporting human life. In a few years, many of these areas will be unusable for agriculture or even for charcoal production. What happens then? The land that once sustained entire communities will no longer provide for them. The charcoal traders will be left with even fewer options, stuck in a circle of poverty that only deepens with every tree that's cut down. But I understand. It's not enough to just say, stop cutting down trees. Telling someone to stop when it's their only way to survive isn't realistic. That's where we, as environmentalists, need to work together with these communities. We can't just focus on enforcement, bans, and regulation. We need to create alternatives that are viable, practical, and immediate for these communities. The solutions are there, but they require investment, education, and most importantly, collaboration. Briquettes, for example, made from agricultural waste, are a sustainable alternative to charcoal, and they don't destroy forests. Solar energy and clean cooking stove are becoming more affordable and accessible. But we need to scale up these solutions. These alternatives can provide the same income, the same energy without devastating the environment. But for these solutions to take root, we need support from the government, NGOs, and even the private sector to ensure that people have access to these technologies at an affordable cost.
For many rural communities, charcoal is both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, it provides a livelihood for millions of Kenyans. In remote areas where farming is difficult due to poor soils or climate conditions, charcoal production is often seen as the only way to make ends meet. This harsh reality is what keeps the charcoal trade alive. It sustains families living on the edge of poverty, providing quick cash in a country where economic opportunities in rural areas are scarce. But this short-term solution comes at a long-term cost. Deforestation leads to land degradation, soil erosion, and the drying up of rivers. As forests disappear, agricultural yields decline, and access to clean water becomes increasingly difficult. The very communities that depend on charcoal are the first to feel the consequences of deforestation. The soil loses its fertility, forcing families into a vicious circle of poverty, pushing them further into reliance on charcoal production.
It's not just about us. The whole supply chain is involved. From the loggers who cut down the trees to the middlemen who buy and transport the charcoal to the cities, to those vendors now there in the markets. Thousands of people rely on this trade to survive. The government bans the logging, but enforcement is weak. You just give a few money to the police and they let you through. Even if they crack down in one area, the business just shifts to another. There is always someone willing to take the risk because poverty makes you desperate. And the big players in this trade, they have power and money. They don't face the same risks we do. For us, it's different. We are at the bottom doing their hard work, but we are the ones blamed for the destruction. You see? People forget that for us, charcoal isn't just a trade, it's a lifeline. It's how we survive in a harsh reality. I don't want to destroy the land. This is the same land I want my children to inherit. But I can't stop. Not unless there is something else for us, some other way to feed my family, some other opportunity that gives me hope, for a better future. Until that happens, the charcoal business will continue because survival always comes first. We are not proud of what we do, but we are not the villains either. We are just trying to make it in a system that has left us with very few choices. Yes.
To the charcoal trader, I say this: I understand that you feel trapped, but we have to look beyond today. The future of your children and the next generation depend on the decisions we make now. We must start the transition towards more sustainable practices before it's too late. We can't afford to keep stripping the land of its resources and expect it to provide for us forever. Once it's gone, it's gone. What if instead of cutting down the last tree, we worked together to plant the next one? What if we took the skills and knowledge you have built over the years and directed them towards sustainable practices? Practices that can regenerate the land rather than destroy it. Change is difficult, especially when the stakes are so high, but I believe there is hope. There are success stories all over Kenya where communities have shifted from charcoal production to sustainable businesses, be it beekeeping, ecotourism, or agroforestry. These businesses not only protect the environment, but also provide a stable long-term income. It's not easy, but it's possible. And we have to believe that together we can find a way to balance both economic, survival, and environmental sustainability. The charcoal trade may feel like a curse you can't escape from, but there is a way forward. It's a path that ensures both the well-being of your families and the preservation of the land that you depend on. Because if we destroy the environment, we destroy ourselves. Let's not wait until it's too late to realize that.
Charcoal production is not just a rural problem. It is driven by urban demand. In cities like Nairobi, Mombasa, and Kisumu, charcoal remains the primary cooking fuel for millions of households. Nearly 70% of Kenyans rely on charcoal and firewood as their main source of energy, particularly in informal settlements and low-income neighborhoods. While charcoal is affordable, its true cost is hidden. The demand from cities put immense pressure on rural areas, where trees are cut down and at unsustainable rates to meet the growing needs of urban households. The convenience of charcoal blinds many to the environmental destructions that happens hundreds of kilometers away. The charcoal trade in Kenya operates largely in the shadows, driven by corruption, illegal logging, and a thriving black market. Despite government bans on charcoal production and logging in certain areas, enforcement is weak and illegal operations continue to flourish. The ban introduced to protect Kenya's dwindling forests has been undermined by powerful cartels who bribe officials and smuggle charcoal out of protected areas. It is a lucrative business worth billions of shillings, and the stakes are high. Those who profit from this illicit trade often do so at the expense of the environment and the local communities. The illegal charcoal trade is not just an environmental issue. It's a matter of security. Forest rangers, conservationists, and local communities who try to stop the trade are often met with threats and violence. The exploitation runs deep, with the poorest members of society often being the ones exploited the most. The charcoal business is a complex problem, but solutions do exist. Efforts are being made to promote sustainable alternatives to charcoal, such as clean energy sources like LPG, liquefied petroleum gas, briquettes made from agricultural waste, and solar cooking. However, these alternatives remain out of reach for many low-income households due to cost and accessibility. Across Kenya, reforestation programs are gaining momentum, with communities coming together to plant trees and restore their ecosystems. These efforts are crucial, but they require long-term commitment and widespread participation. For Kenya to break its charcoal dependency, there must be a collective shift towards sustainability, one that balances economic needs with environmental preservation. The charcoal business in Kenya, once a lifeline for rural communities, has become a curse that threatens the country's forest, wildlife, and future. But it is not a curse that must divine us. The solutions are within reach, and with the right policies, education, and alternatives, we can turn the tide. By embracing sustainable energy, protecting our forests, and supporting those most affected, we can create a future where both people and the environment can thrive. Kenya's story is not one of destruction, but one of hope, resilience, and change. Together, we can ensure that the curse of charcoal becomes a distant memory.